was Torrin Wells and We the Kingdom with Take It All Back. You're on 94.9. It is 14 minutes past 4, and as I mentioned a little earlier, we have a very special guest this afternoon. Of course, it is Tuesday afternoon, so we have Creation Ministries International. And our speaker from Creation Ministries today, we haven't had on the program before. And he's a very special guest from Creation Ministries because he runs a ministry called the Ark Van Ministry. And we're speaking right now to Mr. Rod Walsh. Good afternoon, Rod.
Good afternoon, Mick. Good to be on.
Oh, it's awesome to have you on, and awesome to have someone who I believe is pretty much an expert when it comes to, well, the Ark and, all things about the Ark. And, we can't wait to ask you all sorts of questions, if that's all right.
That's fine, that's fine.
Awesome. Now, look, if anybody does have any questions as we go, please just text them through to me, 0401 949 949. Now, Rod, first question, I have to ask, you've probably seen Noah's Ark, the movie on sort of when it was at the movies, then it was on TV, and they had these giant rock ents. They were like big rock people that fought everybody off as the rains came down. Are they real?
No, not really, no.
No, I thought it might have been a bit of Hollywood coming through.
Yeah, Hollywood, yeah. A lot of that film was, sort of Hollywood style and not really sticking to the biblical script, that's for sure.
Yes, that's sort of what we thought. Now, of course, Rod, you'd get asked all of the classic questions about Noah's Ark running the... Well, first, can you tell us just a little bit about your ministry there, the Ark Van Ministry?
Yeah, well, I actually, God told me to build an ark just quickly back in April 97. I had the model finished after 7 months, quite detailed. And then God spoke to me and said, take it to a waterfront boating festival. So I told the people I've got a model of the oldest boat on record. Would they be interested? Well, they actually gave us the best spot, and for 3 days, Nancy and I never sat down. We had half a dozen, 15, 20 people just firing questions at us for 3 days. From that time, I haven't really stopped travelling since January 1998.
Now, I've got a picture of that ark, the model that you made up. How big is that model?
Just under 2 metres, 1.9 metres long, yeah.
Okay, and you've got all the little animals there, 2 by 2, running onto the ark.
Yeah, 2 by 2 for the unclean, and of course the clean animals went in by 7s, of course.
That's awesome. Now, you've got a big truck as well.
Well, Noah's Ark was huge, really. It was massive in size. It was, you of course, coming from Melbourne at Point Cook would know goalpost to goalpost at the MCG. So Noah's Ark was really enormous in size. And it was equal to a 5-story building, 25 metres wide. Yeah, so it wasn't any little tiny ship like you see in most storybooks. It was quite like... In fact, I come out from England when I was 10, and we went back again, come back again. And one of the ships that we actually came back on, a migrant ship, was a converted World War II aircraft carrier, was exactly the same size as Noah's Ark.
Wow. Wow, and I guess it was one of those boats that you could almost get lost on?
Yeah, quite big, yeah, quite a big boat.
Now, how did all the animals fit on that boat, though? I mean, you say it's big, but we're talking all of the animals, 2 by 2s of all of the animals on Earth.
Well, quite easy, really, when you look at... the Bible says that they went into the ark according to their kind. So let's just consider, for example, dog kind today. There's over 400 breed of dog, but all you needed was 2 original dogs, 2 original horses, 2 original, bears, etc. And so it's not as large a number as people would think. Now, John Woodenrap, he's a scientist in America, did a really intensive 7-year study, and he worked out only 16,000 animals at the very most went on board the ark. And the medium size was that of a small rat. only 11% were larger than a sheep.
Wow.
So there's heaps of room on those. Now, Noah's Ark, if you squash things in, like that model you see, okay, you could fit 350,000 of those inside the real Noah's Ark.
Wow, yes.
So there's heaps of room on the Ark for all the food, which if they weren't hibernated, 14%. All the water, if they didn't catch it off the roof, another 9%. Plenty of room for all the animals, all the food, etc. Yeah.
Well, how did Noah actually keep all those animals alive on the ark? I mean, some of the animals must have been meat-eating animals and they would have eaten other animals.
Well, God brought the animals, and of course, God would have kept them safe. Just like, for example, Daniel was in the lion's den and didn't eat Daniel, did it? You know what I mean? And
yep.
So Noah was told to, collect all the food, etc., for the length of time, which was over 371 days around the ark. So, like I say, only 14% of the volume was needed for food. And, of course, they could have had dried meat, dried fish, all sorts of stuff, and.
Yeah, and I mean, we do read in the Bible. Sorry?
I was going to say ancient people are very good at preserving foods.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Today, of course, we've got fridges and stuff, but if we didn't have a fridge, things would go rotten very quickly.
And we read in the Bible that, when we go to heaven, the lion will lie down with the lamb. God can do that any time. He can do miracles.
Yeah, that's right.
He could have got them to lie down together.
Yeah, like with Daniel, he was down there, and the lions never touched him. And, of course, the next day they threw the bad people in. It says they never reached the ground before they're torn apart.
Yes.
So God's hand is, of course, on a lot of things that will happen. God gave Noah detailed instructions on building the ark.
Yep.
And so Noah built the ark, of course, but God's hand was on it to the landing of it and everything, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the ark's concerned, how stable was the actual boat? Like, it had to endure some pretty harsh seas. I mean, the entire planet's covered. You can imagine there's some pretty big waves and stuff going on. Yeah.
Well, it's actually Korean and American naval architects have done extensive tests. What they found was that Noah's Ark was stable in up to 390-kilometer winds.
Oh, wow.
And they also said that it could ride 30-meter waves comfortably. So it was very, very stable. In fact, it was proven to be 13 times more stable than the minimum requirements of U.S. shipping. And the really interesting thing today to note is that the new oil tankers they make are actually built in the shape of Noah's Ark, virtually.
Oh, really?
Yes, they used to make these long, skinny ones and, curved a lot and so forth, and they started to break up, cause pollution around the world. But the new oil tankers are made more or less flat bottom, and it's very close to the same ratio as Noah's Ark, 6-to-1 length to width.
Now, I can't imagine before Noah's Ark there were many other boats that size.
Probably, but we don't know really. You see, those sort of things, what cities they made and all that sort of stuff. We do know that they did build cities right from the beginning. So why couldn't they build boats? You know what I mean? No, nobody knows really about that.
Yeah, well, it's all been lost away.
But when you look at actually ancient shipbuilding techniques, this is after the flood. Going back to 2000 BC. They used to make ships with multi-layers of planks with mortise and tenon joints. And so, the side of Noah's Ark could have been, say, a meter thick like solid plywood.
Wow.
Yeah, so very, very stable. And very strong, too, by the way, with mortise and tenon joints pinned through with dowels, holding it together really well.
Yeah, well, of course, it had to stay floating for about a year, didn't it?
Yeah. It only had to stay. It floated for 7 months, 5 months, I should say.
5 months,
and
okay.
150 days before it come to rest on the mountains of Ararat, and then of course everything had to dry out, didn't it? The vegetation regrow, but it wasn't until 371 days total that God told them to leave the ark.
Right, I get it. Well, of course, even if it was sort of sitting on the side of a mountain, the water still would have been around them for a while, just slowly going down.
It slowly went down, because it was another 7 months, of course, over, after they landed on the mountain, before they actually got off the ark,
Wow, that's incredible. How long did it take to build the ark?
What, mine or the real one?
The real one.
The real. Well, people have actually looked into this, and many believe it can be built in about 85 years by 4 men.
Wow.
And assuming only the minimum technology, like, say, an axe, a broad axe, and an adze.
Yep.
And so when we look at these sleeper cutters, the railway tracks, there's a museum in Echuca, and you go back into the 1800s, where these guys would go out, select a tree, and they would cut it to size, shape it, and by the end of the day, a good worker would have 12 2.75 meter sleepers, right?
Yep.
Just with a broad axe and an adze. And so that's equivalent to 33 meters of planking. Multiply that by 1 month, you've got nearly a kilometer of planking by one man in one month. And
you say over 80 years.
Sorry?
Over 80 years.
80 years, yeah. Well, of course, Noah was 500 when the flood came.
Yep.
And 600 when 500 when God told him build it, and 600 when the flood came.
Yes. Wow.
So they had within the 100 years to build it. Of course, he was preaching all the time too.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but going off the sleeper cutters, you can see that. Most people today would have no idea of that sort of technology, that they were actually cutting the sleepers that way.
Yep.
We just think today of power saws and electricity and all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But these guys only had a broad axe and an adze.
Yeah.
And like I say, they could cut in 1 month 1 kilometer of planking.
Wow.
So it's very feasible when you look at that, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And as far as the animals on the ark are concerned, I know a lot of people have this question. It's one that we've heard from some of the other creation guys. They think there might have been dinosaurs on the ark. Were there?
Yeah, definitely. Well, the evidence... See, dinosaur's a new name. It was only invented about 180 years ago.
Yep.
And so when you go back into history, look at all the stories of dragons.
Yeah.
For example, Marco Polo, when he on his journey, he just did a journal, and just a matter-of-fact reporting, he said he came across this animal, that had a huge body, a huge head, and mouth wide enough to swallow a man, sharp teeth, little legs just under the jaw, with very sharp claws, big long tail. What's he describing there?
Mm.
It sounds a bit like a T-Rex sort of a animal, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
And
Yes.
he said that if any animal or person goes anywhere near these things, they're terrified for their life, and that's just matter-of-fact reporting.
Yeah.
Bishop Bell was buried 500 years ago in England. I've actually been there, taken photos of his gravesite, and on his gravesite he's got 2 long-necked, long-tailed dinosaurs fighting. One's got spikes on the tail. We know exactly which ones they are.
Wow.
So there's lots and lots of, you've got St. George and the Dragon, of course, a well-known one. But basically, dinosaur is just a new name for dragon. But they've actually found soft dinosaur bones in Montana and Alaska that they're actually still soft. They're still bone. They haven't, been mineralized, and they've even got the soft, smelly tissue and the red blood cells.
Yeah.
So how old could they be?
Mm.
And of course, the Bible clearly says that God created all the animals on 6 days, 6,000 years ago, didn't he?
Yes, absolutely.
He clearly says that. So it's a matter of understanding the difference between the names. That's really all that
dinosaur
matters
and dragon.
here.
All right, look, we're going to go into a little break right now.
Yeah.
We're currently speaking to Rod Walsh from Creation Ministries International. Please send your questions through 0401 949 949. Right now we're going to listen to Kate Thompson with Grateful.
Crazy!
That was the Newsboys with Crazy. You're on 94.9. It's 22 minutes to 5. And we have Mr. Rod Walsh from Creation Ministries International on the line. He's been talking to us about, the Ark. Yes, Noah's Ark, that amazing, huge, giant boat. And, Rod's built an Ark. It's not quite as big as the real one. His was a couple of metres long. It took him 7 months. It sounded pretty awesome. But he runs an awesome Noah's Ark ministry with Creation Ministries. And he's pretty much the expert when it comes to, anything Noah's Ark. So if you have any questions, please send them through to us, 0401 949 949. Now, Rob, talking about the Ark, as far as the Ark is concerned, and this big flood that, was around for a long time, how do you know it wasn't just a local flood?
Well, the evidence, of course, for a worldwide flood is everywhere. When you look at the water-laid strata worldwide, the average depth is 1.6 kilometres deep. When you look at something like the Grand Canyon, you've just got pancake layers of different coloured water-laid strata. Well, how did that get there? And of course, the people who believe in, say, evolution and that believe in millions and millions of years. It's all laid down over millions of years. But you've got a lot of problems with that. You see, you've got certain layers where you have a knife-edge difference between two layers. Yep. And apparently over, many millions of years apart. Well, the first question is, how come there's little or no erosion between those layers for all those millions of years? It just doesn't make any sense, does it? Mm. And so when you look at those layers, there's so much evidence that they were all laid down so rapidly. You even have, as well as the fossils in the strata, you've got things like raindrop impressions. Now, imagine some big raindrops hit this mud, and you've got these beautiful little circles in the mud. Well, how long do they last, before, say, the wind and the sun and the weather destroy them? Not that long. Yep. But you've got perfectly preserved raindrop impressions between some layers. So it wasn't obviously no time at all before the next layer come over to preserve them. So you've got the rapid burial, of everything. You've got fish, for example, fish eating another fish. Well, how fast was that? Mm. And you've got billions of fish with the fins sticking up rigid, which means they were buried alive by the billions. So the evidence of this slow and gradual is not there. You have tree fossils that go up, tree trunks that go up through many, many layers of strata. Well, there's no way that a tree could stand up, on the evolution time frame of, say, millions of years and not rot away. Mm. So all of those things had to be laid down basically at the same time. So, the strata, the rapid burial, and many other things show us that it was actually a worldwide flood. But people who do believe in millions of years have to then relegate the flood to a local flood. But that doesn't really make much sense, Why would Noah spend maybe 100 years building this massive ocean liner when all he needed to do was, say, travel, for a few months to higher ground? Yep. For example, if you look at the pioneers, say, in the U.S., the covered wagons, they traveled from the east to the west, thousands of kilometers, and many of them actually walking beside the wagons because it was just too uncomfortable in the wagon. So Noah only had to walk, maybe for a few months with all the animals, and they're in higher ground if it was a local flood. So why would it be a local flood? Why would the birds go on board? They could easily fly to safety, couldn't they? Mm. And of course, what did God say after the flood? he'll never flood the world again. He gave a rainbow covenant, didn't he?
Yeah.
And so, if it was a local flood, then God has lied thousands of times, hasn't he? Because there's been thousands of local floods.
Yeah. Yeah.
But of course, God never lies. God is always truthful, and of course, He tells us clearly that He would never flood the world again. So,
Yes.
I mean, there's just so much evidence today that for a young earth and rapid burial.
Rod, I've seen some of the pictures you're mentioning, about these tree trunks and stuff that are sticking up through layers that are meant to be millions of years old. Is there no possible way that a tree trunk could, trees that fall under mud, we know that they what do? They calcify or something? They basically turn into rock. Is there no way that a trunk could turn into rock if it was still above the dirt?
Petrified wood?
Yep.
No, it's got to have that minerals replaced in the water to turn it into petrified wood, really.
Right, so it has to be covered.
Yeah. Well, you just look at the evidence. Like, I drive around and you see these trees that have died, right?
Yep.
And you've got some trees that have recently died, got all the branches. Then you see other trees that have been dead for maybe quite a couple of decades, and all the small branches have rotted and fallen off. And then you go further on and you find it's just a tree stump. And then you go and find places where fire's gone through and even burned the stump. So, there's no way that a tree stump could stand up for, a million years or even hundreds of thousands of years and not rot away.
Yeah,
insects destroy them. Fires destroy them. They rot away.
It seems really obvious to us talking about this. But how do the evolutionists, how do they explain this away? It seems impossible from an evolutionary stance to actually have an explanation for these logs and stuff sticking up through the layers.
Well, they've really got no explanation for a lot of things, really. You look at in the fossils of fish eating a fish. Well, if it's slow, how does that happen to be slow and gradual? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the evidence really in the fossil layers is catastrophic event. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Not this slow and gradual that they talk about. In fact, all you see, what's happening today is erosion. Things are eroding all the time, aren't they?
Yep.
I've checked out the erosion on the coast of England, on the south and the east coast. In one place, the coast is eroded where they've got soft cliffs, been eroding for hundreds of years at 7 meters per annum.
Wow.
Even the white cliffs down the bottom of England, around Beachy Head and that, they're eroding at half to a metre a year. In fact, there's a lighthouse that was down there that had to be moved back many metres because they found themselves right next to the edge of the cliff after a big heap had fallen in. And so you've got erosion happening all the time. But, but I'll give you an example. Say England is supposed to be hundreds of millions of years old, right?
Yep.
That's what they say on the evolution time frame. But let's take, say, 1 metre of erosion and multiply that by 1 million years.
Mm-hmm.
That's 1,000 kilometres.
Yeah.
Really, how could England be, But even if you divide that by 10, it's still gone for, way short in the evolution time frame, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And like I say, there are places like there's a church built in England that was built 500 years ago, 4 kilometres from the coast. It's now half a kilometre from the coast.
Yeah. Wow.
You see, so you find that things are eroding all the time. Mountains are eroding. So there's no way. In fact, scientists have worked out that the whole of North America would erode in 10 million years.
Yeah,
So
well, even down your way, the
million.
12 apostles, there's not 12 left, is there?
There's only 7, now. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Wow.
So things are eroding away very rapidly around the world. But, it's no problem for a young Earth. But it's a big problem if you start to extrapolate all this information out over millions of years.
Absolutely. Rod, we've come to that time of day. It's 4:48 where we have to say goodbye, and a huge thank you. I hope we get you again, maybe next year. I know you're going to the UK shortly.
Yeah.
But awesome speaking with you. And, we've had people trying to call.
Right.
Some people try and ring, but it's a text line, guys.
Yeah, okay. Good.
But, look, I thank you so much. It's been eye-opening. And we love talking about Noah's Ark and Noah's flood. It's always awesome. So thank you so much, Rod, for spending the time with us today.
Thanks for inviting me, Mick. Appreciate it.
You're on 94.9. It is 12 minutes to 5. We've got Dante Bowe up next. Be all right.